So,
Ready?
yeah, I guess so.
Okay. Apologies for getting that. So, very nice to have Sunny Boy and team here
Yes.
today. So we have Yen and Hayden as well. Well, this project is from the point of view of SFL. It's a classic appliable linguistics project from the point of view of MBA in terms of expresses the concept of design. It's a classic design project. And from my point of view, it's a classic cooperative discourse analysis problem. So what more to do? I suppose.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. It's actually exactly what Jim said, it's all of that, but we do couch it in quite a different set of terms and concepts as well. So I'll start off by talking a bit more about what I mean by subaltern linguistics and what the credible approach is. We will move from there to talking more about the background of why we developed this. And then I'll read the book itself with you, and then we will go on and talk a little bit about language. But I do want to give more time today to the art and the music composers, because they're the ones who created those parts. And usually in these seminars, we talk a lot more about language anyway. So it's kind of nice to listen to other modalities as composers and artists. And then I'll talk a bit more about how the students in professional practice class, that's Prof P 2024, work together to create the workbooks. And yes, and then we'll look briefly at the workbooks if we have time. Otherwise, I will let that stuff be something you guys can explore, because it's already all on the website. And then hopefully we'll have time for QA. All right, so moving on. So what is subaltern practice? Subaltern practice is essentially work that empowers local and geographically relevant epistemologies. It's not driven by theory, even though we may draw on theory. It can also be done by people who have no linguistics necessarily. It can be done by people who would do other stuff in their lives. And we look at those things in relation to how they're tackling real world issues in the community where they live. So trying to address issues that people have where they are. So it can be done in any language, any dialect. There's no restrictions. And in fact, we often encourage people to do work in their own languages. So then the workbooks, for example, that we will see are workbooks for teaching Cantonese, workbook for teaching Mandarin, and in other projects, we have created other kinds of workbooks as well. So we try to create this project through what we call the credible approach. And the credible is an acronym, which stands for contextually relevant. So think locally. We recommend people do projects in the location, in the context where they are based in, or where they have very strong collaborators, because collaboration is extremely important in this kind of work. Credible projects are driven not by theory, but they respond to real world practical needs. And theory can be very relevant and is very useful. In fact, the Frog River, we composed it keeping theory in mind, but that is not always the case. In some cases, we may ignore it, especially when I'm working with people who have no linguistics training at all. So sort of thinking around different ways of engaging with them. We have a number of stakeholders in these projects, and many of the stakeholders are people who are in the community and doing stuff in their real lives. So we try to draw on the local experiences and pay attention to the local beliefs and practices, because if the project is designed for a context, it needs to reflect the ways that the people in that context live and work. So it's quite relevant to be. At the same time, we do look at and are informed by diverse approaches and experiences. So not just Western stuff and not just theoretical stuff. And I'll talk more about how we approach literature analysis in a credible approach, which is quite different from doing a literature review in a traditional project. The whole focus of credible actually is the B bit. If there is no benefit of, if there's no real world benefit of what we are doing, then my question is, why do it? Why do we spend years, sometime of our life trying to do projects where there's no real benefit in the community where the people are? I'll give an example, of course, from Pakistan. There have been almost about between 1,000 to 2,000 PhDs being, generated every year. So obviously people who have done these PhDs have spent years of their time doing their work. But if you look at the community, if you look at the environment, if you look at the issues, political issues, you realize that none of that work is actually translating into harmonizing the communities. So it's really important to look at the context, the work in terms of benefit and what benefit there is. If there is no benefit, I recommend people don't do that work, do something else. And when you do this, of course, you're leading the field and the discipline because you're creating material and resources that didn't exist. And in doing that, it's sort of it's exemplary work within the field, and it can serve as models for other people to draw on. I won't talk about a lot of examples today, but there are plenty of them that we can talk about. And of course, all of it has to be done ethically. And when we talk about ethics here, we are talking about ethics, not consent forms and things like that. We really do. So in a sense, sometimes one of the examples I often give is doing field work in linguistics is, we can have ethical people sign these forms, but the problem is not the field work. The problem is the discipline and the very purpose of doing that PhD. If that purpose is only to document a language and leave the community where it is, then what is ethical about it? So, there are really big questions around these things. I've written quite a bit of, popular stuff around these things, and I collected all of it and put it into a book that was published a couple of years ago called Writings on Subaltern Practice. This book has no references, even though it's published by Palgrave Macmillan. It is a compilation of poetry and essays, and it's written for a very general audience, even though some of the issues are very complex in dealing with it. I've also been working with my tutors and my team here to translate this subaltern practice into a pedagogical approach. And we've been training students in developing these projects. I've been doing this for about 5-6 years now already. And we now have a book coming out, should be released later next month. And with my PhD students that looks at essentially it's a textbook for how people can adopt this approach when they are doing their own teaching. The part one is sort of more, it's where we talk about the issues. Chapter one introduces the need for the project. Chapter two moves us away from looking at any discipline or even linguistics perhaps, and looks at how we engage with the world through all of our sensory systems. So how do we create meanings with all of our sensory systems that we have, especially looking at taste, smell, and touch, which are often ignored in other aspects of linguistics. Then we've got examples in education, environment, well-being, health and well-being, and economic development. There's multiple examples from many of them from my students, but not all of them. Then part three looks at how we actually do it. And then essentially we here use the genre pedagogy. Chapter 8 is deconstruction of the ribbit pond and how we create a project. Chapter 9 is joint construction, where we work with the readers on creating a project together on the environmental issues. And chapter 10 is the independent construction, pushing people out and getting them to do their own projects. And then part 4 are example reports, credible project reports. So we've also been working on developing a genre for how to write these reports. And so these 4 examples showcase how students write these reports, and we have not edited this section. So essentially we have left these reports as they are with their stylistic variations and everything. Because of course, a lot of people who are adopting the credible approach come from their contexts and where they may not necessarily have access to the kind of resources we have. So a lot of variation is acceptable in report writing, and we encourage that. In terms of the development of the project, it starts off with the conceptualization, looking at the issues, the goals, the specific goals of the project, and getting a team together. So getting a team of collaborators. And of course, I've got 2 of the collaborators here. I've got a collaborator in Victoria. She's online. Hi, Maddie. And then we've got a team of about 30 students who worked with me in professional practice as well. So quite a large team of collaborators there. Data analysis for us is what we call literature analysis for project planning. So we do not start from identifying a gap in the research. In fact, I discourage people to start from the literature. I encourage them to start from the real world issue and then go into the literature and explore how that issue might have been addressed in various different contexts and in different parts of the world. And then looking at those projects, develop their own theoretical orientations and needs. So the theory comes in from the project rather than the theory leading the project. And we do adopt the positive discourse analysis, as Jim was saying, but we do expand it. So our positive discourse analysis is transsensory, and we get people to do an analysis of all sensory systems, whether they are direct or metaphorical. So of course, in context of language and image, a lot of the engagement with other sensory systems is metaphorically achieved because there is no real, for example, taste or things. And this is exemplified in the book as well, and we'll look at it. That then translates into material design. So we're still doing literature analysis and positive discourse analysis, but now we are looking at it in terms of designing material. And once we have the basic drafts done, we go through consultations and revisions, which essentially happens all the time. And then we move on to action and continuity. So in this case, the Frog River started off as a class project with a poem. Then we had the artwork and the music, and we have other things happening in as well, which I'll talk about at the end. We, of course, talk about documentation, reflection, and sharing. So this event here is, in a sense, our sharing. I have started sharing the Frog River in different contexts. We have a website. I just released the song version on YouTube today, just before the session, and we will be doing other things as well. We've got a Red Note as well, which is in China, which is also promoting the Frog River and things. And then, of course, there are updates and extensions and continuations of the projects. So this is all for Credible. So let's move into the Frog River. It started off in July. I was up in Cape York, which is the country where I've been adopted. And I was talking to Uncle Bennet, who's an elder from a Kuku Yalanji community. And we were talking about lots of different things. So he started off talking about a Kuku Yalanji dictionary that was written in the 1990s, and where he and his family and community had been engaged in developing this dictionary. We then looked at material children's books that he has created with his community. And some of them are now being used in the public school in the Mossman area. So that's Mossman, far north Queensland, not Mossman here. And we talked about other way possibilities. And that's essentially the germination of the idea about how we need some sort of a text that stresses the importance of unity, because within the indigenous communities, there are quite a few conflicts. There are conflicts within the family. There's lots of issues that need to be tackled, and getting people to think about finding ways to reunite is a place where we can all start. So that's where the seeds of the story were set. So this is the Kuku Yalanji dictionary that he showed. The frogs are not very happy. I wasn't very happy, and Uncle Bennet realized he was not very happy either. Just look at the image of the cover. I mean, this is 1990s. This is not a book published in the 1920s or the 1850s. It's a very recent book. The first sentence there, the Kuku Yalanji alphabet has 16 letters. And I was like, wait a second, how can you start a description of a language talking about letters? Language is not letters. Indigenous Australian languages had no writing systems at all. So to start off a document saying it, the Kuku Yalanji alphabet has 16 letters, I just wait a second. If this is how they start this book, I don't need to read anything else. How can I trust anything else that's going on? And there's so much work, especially in the context of indigenous languages, that is very similar in nature. And this is part of the reason I sort of moved away from linguistics and said, I need to do something else for a while. And that's where I've been working on developing subaltern practice and credible approach. So after we looked at this book and we talked about how language is sound and it's not writing. In fact, this is also from the book. He actually, after our conversation, he said, wait, don't go. He opened the book and he said, can you write down what you just said? So this is actually on his book now. And he asked me to write it because he wanted to show it to his community members and other people as in terms of what they do. So we talked then about the sensory systems and how the sensory systems are engaged, how we can sequence the sensory systems, why sequence them, how can we group them and why group them. Again, lots of stuff that I won't talk about today. I have talked about in other places, and it is in the books. Then I shared with him what we have been doing. So I shared with him the Ribbit Ribbit Pond, which is now in 35 languages. It's on the FLC website. You can download it, and you can choose up to 2 languages at any time, or you can choose not to have any other language at all. The book is now also published in a physical form by Starfish Bay Publishers, and it is available all around. So there's a copy in the Bleed bookstore as well. Pretty much all public schools around New South Wales have a copy of the book. So we can, and this book was written by Ivan as part of his master's program as a credible project report. I think Jim was the examiner for his dissertation. So a very successful example of a credible project. And then he showed me, Uncle Bennet showed me a book that he had developed in his community, also a bilingual book in Kuku Yalanji language and English. And the artwork was done by the children, and they combined image with artwork here. So, yeah. So after all of these things, we said, all right, now let's work together. This is just before semester 2 started. So this was happening in middle of July last year. And then I came back and the semester started, and I said, this is what we are going to focus on then. So for the first homework assignment for language professional practice, I said, let's here's what Uncle Bennet told me. Here's the story. Of course, I edited it a bit. It's not exactly his words. I said, here's our task. Here's a challenge. Let's work together to create a story. We started off with the story idea, and then I gave them Ivan's dissertation, Ivan's dissertation is written as a textbook. So his dissertation doesn't have any chapters. It has units and lessons. So I told them to look at lesson number 2, which is about the verbal mode, because they were focusing on creating the poem. So you can see how we're using the grammar and as an entry point into creating the text, instead of doing the usual thing, which is taking the text and doing the analysis. So we're flipping that around and over. Within the first week, I had 40 different drafts of the story. And then we, of course, worked through all those drafts, and then we narrowed them down to about 10, and then 3, and then finally we took 1. And then once we had agreed on that 1, I took on that draft, and then I rewrote that draft. So the final version is my writing, but it is based on the whole class. All right, so that's the Frog River. You guys can, I just posted the video as well. I did this today. So if you go to the page, you can access the video and the flip book as well. Now, I will, as I promised, do a reading of this book here with you. And this is where I'm hoping, that I can share this and people can see it. Can people see my screen still? Can they see the book? Okay, cool. All right. So let's read it. It's the Frog River. By Frog River, swift and wide, 2 frogs, Jack and Mark, reside. Jack was bold and full of pride. Mark was cautious, never lied. One bright morning, in the sun's warm glow, a red kangaroo hopped to and fro. Is it safe to cross? He asked with cheer. Jack said, yes, dive right in, have no fear. But Mark shook his head, his voice full of dread. The current is too strong, you will be swept. Not heeding the warning, Frog Tender leapt, only to find that his legs were inept. Later the day, a small possum drew near. Is it safe to cross the river, I fear? Mark said, it's too risky, please stay away. But Jack said with a beam, you'll be okay. With hope in her heart, Posse took a leap, but soon she was caught in waters so deep. Before they could blink, they saw her being swept, and the brothers knew it was their misstep. Then a platypus, looking angry, did rise. What's causing these tragedies? Open your eyes. Mark confessed, we argue, we fight on who can cross and who just might. Enough, cried the platypus, and this fight. You are brothers, your bond needs to be tight. Work together with wisdom, with foresight, or more will be lost to the river's might. As evening fell, an old wombat strolled by. Is it safe to cross? I'm eager to try. Now Jack and Mark knew they had to be wise. So, joining their strengths, a plan they devised. Jack led the way, Mark swam on the side, guiding Wombi through the rising tide. Together they swam steady and true, and safely old Wombi made it through. Through mistakes and lessons, the brothers at last learned unity is strength with powers so vast. With teamwork and love, together and steadfast, there's no river too wide, no current too fast. So that was how it started. And yeah. Okay. And then, of course, as you have probably noticed, there's a lot of use of the narrative structure. There's the use of grammar. Again, all these things are very carefully selected and chosen. So you could see that there is a clear narrative structure there. So we talked about, of course, again, this is all about application of theory. So in the classes, our discussion was how do we create the text so that we've got the clear orientation and what kind of grammatical resources work best in that section. How do we create complications again? What kind of grammatical choices work best in these things? And how does it shift? So we looked at the narrative genre, then we looked at the transitivity, especially looking at where we would use different process types, how we want to create action, and where we would have sort of some of the mental process. And notice there are very few mental processes, and there is only one existential all the way at the end. So all these things, again, we discussed them in class in terms of how the grammar works to create these texts in terms of these meanings, and we came to do this. We also talked about rhythm and rhyme. I know that some of you are coming from a class on phonology. So we worked on it again in terms of the application. So how do we use rhyming to create different effects? How do we vary the length of the meter of each of the lines and the syllables? So you will notice the couples are always together. So they're always 11, 11, 8, 8. Let's notice how it comes with the complication. So then a platypus looking angry did rise. What's causing these tragedies? Open your eyes. This is one of the longest set of syllables, and that's because the platypus is angry and he's got something to say. And notice that shifts very quickly to 8-8, where Mark confesses and Mark realizes the guilt, and there's not a lot that Mark wants to say now because he's feeling guilty. So we've actually used meter and syllable and length and everything that we could think of to actually create these effects within the text. And you will see when we talk about the artwork and the music, how the choice of our language actually allowed the artists to translate this work into music and into watercolor paintings. In fact, that's what we will do next. Here, you want to come up?
Okay.
Okay, check it.
No.
Okay, check.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. too loud. Okay, hi everyone. My name's Yan Liu. So I was a graduate from Culture Studies and Cross Culture and Applied Linguistics from UCIT. I'm very glad to return with the other face of language and being as an artist for the watercolor illustration work for Frog River. So I'll start my presentation from the storyboard. So it tell you like how I broke the text down into 4 scenes, and then each of them representing different times of the day and different emotions of the participants. So because the illustration will show a different phase of the story and might also carry out the information in another way. So it's quite important for me to like extract some elements for me to use to show like the scene and the image. So here is the basic idea, like how I break it down by the time. So it's from the analysis of the text. So all the elements actually come from the language pattern of each 2 standards. So 2 standards come into complication and the resolution as you saw before. So first I grabbed the time and then the animal, and Jack and Mark said something differently to the animal, and then the animal's attempt, and then the result of the cross. So basically, that's the shared elements of each part, and then see how I first build from the script to a whole storyboard. So I just first initially break it down into a 4x4 like a table here. So basically each little image stands for 2 lines of the point. And then I try to extract the information and think about how would that happen in reality. And then I build this one. But it might be not so clear on the main screen here, but some of them I actually mark with like a green background. And so since 1, the first one and the second one, since 2, the first one and the second one, and third one is like the last 2. And then the last one is the first 2. So I merged them together because they have minimized like a movement or emotional expression. So I use them more for setting up the background and like a wide view, like a panoramic view. So everything's bringing together. They set up the scene, give you some more background information, like what's the atmosphere feel like, and then also bring all the characters onto the stage at the same time. And then I break them down into smaller image, like a close-up view. So you see more like details, like movements and emotions, which conveys more sensitivities like a material process, verbal process, and mental process. So let's have an example for the kangaroo. So as all the key elements I mark in the text, you can see how they've been distributed in the illustration. Like Jack is in the front, and then we have Mark hiding on a mangrove tree, and then a kangaroo come, and I use like a bright yellow color contrasts with the cool tone of the river to show the like warm glow of the morning. And you can see how it comes from my storyboard and then emerge into a big wheel, a big picture that have like all the essential elements you need for this scene. And then to standard 3, as I said, there's more movements and emotional expressions. So I break it down into 2 small images. And then it have like a material process, like the kangaroo left, and then Mark shook his head poo, and then like what's the outcome, like the result of kangaroo's attempt. And then another interesting thing I want to share from my storyboard is like I try to demonstrate communication and collaboration, like how the process happened by positioning Jack and Mark on different sides of the river. So at the beginning, they always stand on two sides of the river, and generally Mark stands a bit forward, and then Jack probably hide in the bush or somewhere like a bit in the back. Because like it also relevant to their personalities. Like Mark is always overconfident and give like a very positive suggestion, though sometimes it's not very good. And then Jack is very confident, and then Mark always hiding in the back and like feeling a bit scared. We talk about it later in the character designs. But anyway, at the beginning, they always keep this kind of pattern of positioning themselves on the image. But then later, when the plotters come, they reflected on themselves. So I want them to stand together. And they also have like their reflections together on the river too. So the river also like show like you're on different sides, you separate, but now you come together and you try to work together. And later I make a change on it. So when the wombat comes, they first stand together because they devise like to help the wombat together. And then I let Mark like the position in the front of the image. If you remember when you were looking at the illustration earlier, and then let Jack stand a bit back in the image. So it's like they swap their position, but in this way they work together and they listen to each other. And now we come to character designs. So we have two frogs as the main characters of the Frog River. So Jack is like a bird and full of pride, and Mark is cautious and never lies. So for this one, I try to add more like a body language. As you can see, Jack is a bit like a hinging forward. That's like a kind of showing his confidence. And Mark is a bit like getting back, and then his body language also shows maybe he's a bit nervous, anxious, and also from the shoulders, like it's like getting a bit tight in the shoulders. And then I have more details here from different images. So it's not always the same, but at the beginning, Mark always pretend to like open his body more. So his body language is a bit more positive. And then I'm sorry, I'm messing up again. Jack always have like an open body, like a very positive body language. And then Mark is like somehow hiding in the bush. You can find like three of him is like hiding in the bush. And then also like doing something like shake his hand, saying no, or there's like a bit negative body language. But then when the story like a process, of course their like expression and body expression change. So Jack also like feel a bit guilty, so his body is a bit like a squash. And then Mark also tried to think about what he can do. So he's like somehow expanding his body and getting more confidence and more smiles on his face. And one very cute thing is the Jack here. I got like the inspirations from the lollipop man standing on the streets. So yeah, I think it's like also a fun thing that you can find in this illustration. And the other animals too. So their image also like reflect on their personalities. But of course, I know like most kangaroos quite strong. So you might find the kangaroos in the book is like far more stronger than this one. And then we talk about scene design. So built on all the things I talked about earlier, and now we come to color design, color palettes. So how I use different colors to show different atmosphere and the composition of the word we try to build. So the morning I use bright yellow and some cool toned blue. to give you a warm, but not like very, hot and humid feeling. But then scene 2, I set it as midday because I think the posse thing is like something dangerous about to happen, the dangers approaching. So I want to make the color a bit more vivid and add some warm tone into the scene. It's probably hotter than the room right now. And then scene 3, I set it as sunset. It's because like I personally think sunset has the most intensive color of the day, and we have like a long reflection of the river because the main things about the river, and it brings all the colors together. And I also use the metaphor to demonstrate like how the frogs make the shift. So how they have their self-reflection and then they realize they need to work together. And also, I think that's the most important shift in the story. So I want to give you the excellent and spectacular color of this one. And it also helps build the cohesion between scene 2 and scene 4. So when the evening starts, like the flow of the narrative go through different time of the day. And then to the warmest one, everything cooled down again. And it's back to a cool tone and very peaceful, harmonious. And I also add some like a yellow and neon green color as the fireflies to bring some vivid taste and like some elements to the last one. And now you can see how they're coming from the text and then the storyboard, and then eventually to the scene in a like a wide view that you can see all the characters, but all the characters setting in a different scene. And another thing to talk about the scene design is local creatures. So if you find that when you were listening to the point, actually we have a lot of local creatures hiding in the scenes. Like we have a snake on the tree, cassowary, a crocodile, and a mud crab. All these things inspired by Kuku Yalanji Kanchi's website. Because I try to do my research and see like, oh, what's their natural environments look like, and how can the story can relate to their like geographic features more. So I grabbed these cute ideas and try to hide it in the book, and also try to make this book a bit more playful. So it's like extra information than the text itself. And also another feature is I actually drew a lot of mangrove trees in the illustration. So it's also like inspired by the Kuku Yalanji like the geographic features. I find they have like so many mangrove trees because they're just near the beach, near the ocean. And these trees live in salty water, and some of the images like quite cute. It's like the trees walking to the beach. So they have very strong roots. Their roots is somehow like their feet. So I just grabbed this feature and then made a lot of them in different scenes. And I also heard that Kuku Yalanji country, they have their own storytells about crocodiles in Salt River, because like the river connects to the sea. And they also talk about things about mangrove tree and like a crocodile show in the previous page. So I just like had brought all these things together to like immerse our audience into the story's word we want to show, and also trying to build the storytelling process in a more like a powerful and colorful way with the visual approach. So after all this, we want to introduce you to watch our Frog River music video. So it's everything all together. You're welcome to join us by clapping with the feet or
Sorry. Can the people on this side see it? Because it seems like it's not. Can you? Okay. 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 What is this? Movie from the past. All right. So actually, that takes us straight into the music. Let me start the PowerPoint again and pass it on to Hayden. Maddie couldn't join us, but Hayden will introduce her. And yeah, do you want me to do the slides for you? Sure. Okay. Okay. So
Hi, so I'm Hayden and I'm Buddy and
just put it in the topic and you can put this in.
so yeah, and we wrote the music. So just quickly about where we are. So I'm Hayden. I'm a violinist and a violinist. I study physics and calculus. You are a professor of English and literature. And May. So May is an opera that you put for. I know it is good enough and very he is a director of Tyzzer concept.
Right, actually, was also here.
And she's currently assistant director, Lisbon. So, why are we playing on music? I feel that music is able to enhance any kind of art, art form, or text, and I think music in a way is a very distilled form of feeling. So you listen to music, listen to emotion, very directly. And so you can, it's another medium through which you can communicate and demonstrate the emotion that's already found in the text of the poem or in the text as well as an artwork. So also with music is that music places a really large emphasis on the rhythm and nature of the text, which is very important because you're learning the language. It's very effective way to learn the natural sequence language. It also aids in memory. So I'm sure lots of individuals remember after someone finding other things. And it can also, which doesn't really do here, but it can also transform the original interpretation of text. So for example, you might have a happy sort of poem with sad music over it, and it changes how you feel. That's not what we did here, but it's something that you can do with the text. So I think it's important. So the first thing, and I think that was the most important thing for us writing music, was to figure out the most natural sort of nature and the skipping pattern of the poem. So we read through the poem a lot and to made the notes up there and the slides. And we wanted to fit this into a consistent music beat. So instead of I thought it was too wide, for skip very wide, or skip too wide to frogs down. So once we had that scaffold of the rhythm text, then honestly the rest of it comes very natural. So the second part was we wanted to play melody notes. And when we speech has very natural melodies in the result. It has inflection, has pitch, and it's all very natural. So for example, by frogs river, swift and wide, sort of upwards range. And so in the melody, we reflected that. So the melody that so also we can look for clues in the text. So in that example, there's the type of every rise, right? So you rise and then the melody goes on, right? And so we used these sort of melodies to help us create a melody that reflected the text in a very effective way. And the third step is the harmony and chords. So the chords in music, I feel a lot of time can depict the mood or the emotion behind it. So use simple chords into melody and it can change how the melody makes you feel. And then along with that, we wanted to work out structure for the song, and we wanted the structure to also reflect the structure of the poem and the structure of the story. And that was in some ways a bit of a tricky thing to do because poetic structure and structure of the song don't always line up. So you have to find sort of interesting ways to combine these together. So go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about structure. So in the song, we have basically three different music lines. And I just want to label A, B, and C. So we start off with A, which is sort of the main tune. I'll just play it quickly, so I see how it goes. So that tune is the sort of the main tune. I think that's like the frogs in the river, all that. You can hear it has an upwards sort of motion to it, which is reflected by the natural speaking pattern for those lyrics. So for that first stanza, we play that music section if it's twice in the stanzas. So it runs from wide. So that section music plays from My Frog River to Martha's Eye, and then starts again from Jack's Bowl to another part. So we get two minutes of music, that first stanza. Then after that, we go into a new section because I thought we've already heard the same tune twice, so something different. Then we have the B section, so we just play that. So I wanted the B section to be a little bit more contrasting than the first one. So the A is a little bit more sort of vibrant, a bit more jumpy, and then the B section is a bit more mellow and laid back. A bit more sort of pensive in nature, and also contrasting the A section. So the music in the B section lasts the whole stanza. So there's no repeat. So that goes once, and then we'll track the A section again, and then back into the B section. So after this, we've heard these two pieces of music a fair few times. So I thought it's time to produce another section of music. And this is also where we have our applications that sorry, where contextually it's our so for this section, it's a little bit more poppy. The tune goes over much fewer notes. So the A and the B tune, the range of the melody is quite large, whereas in the C tune, the range of the melody is quite small. And the motion is a lot faster. So, and we thought this reflected with something more clever of nature, the story is complicated a little bit more, as well as reflect that as well. Also, I just marked after which you have C1, is where the platypus comes, and we just have a summary brief. Very briefly, there's one more section of the music, the platypus, and also in this section, Maggie, she speaks some lyrics as well. So her performance of this song is quite theatrical. It's very music theatre in the place, and we thought that would be very beneficial to assisting in telling the story, because at the end of the day, we want this music to serve the text and to serve the story. So very important for us that we performed it in such a way that it was storytelling, well, not just sort of the music being the subject and having text and capacity. And then for the coda, we also finished on the A section as well, but just with a slight variation on the end that we finished. That's just choose. So I'll talk a little bit about a little bit more deep analysis. So I said earlier that we had to find the most sort of natural speaking rhythm that would fit into our musical framework, System B. And this was often quite easy, but there were a couple of moments that were somewhat difficult. For example, the text then applied wasn't only device. So that one, when I spoke that straight naturally, when the platypus that we only device, it goes quite quickly, but there's a lot of syllables in there. So in order to fit that into the music, we had to slow down the speech of the platypus. So And the music goes through the line dance in a plaid or puss with the angry vibes. So you have to come up with every now and then. I won't call the word. Like when you, sorry for the word anyway, like when you sort of, what's the word when you compromise? But you have to make some adjustments every now and then. So yes, so there. We also, as I said, with the melody, so sometimes use the melody to reflect or use the text, getting some sort of help with the melody, and the same with the rhythm as well. And you can use the rhythm of the song, emphasize it within the text. So, for example, when you have control, gold has a longer duration in the song. Emphasize that as well as time. It's not very it's fine.
Mark.
So that's what we did with it. So earlier I mentioned about how the chords we choose impact how we feel. And that was an important decision. You have to decide, well, how is the text making me feel and what kind of emotions I want to elicit from the listener when writing the song. So you can do a couple of options. I wanted the music to have a little bit more of a sort of folksy kind of feel to that. So I chose sort of various chords and harmonies that are a bit more reflective sometimes, especially in the opening music of more folksy kind of tunes. I thought that a bit more like the bush, stuff like that, rather than more sort of poppy kind of harmonies. So I just have an example to give you an idea. So I've got two. So that example is with a more, I guess, sort of standard kind of harmony. And then the one I chose, that can sound good. But this I decided to use chords, some chords, and word individual. That gives a little bit more flavor to the music. I think very interesting, makes it sound a little bit more weird. You have that very interesting. So the other thing we can do, so normal music is lifted, right? You use all the relative voice wonderful. But you can also change the make it. And you can do that in a way that's very subtle. You can do things in a way that's very obvious. So we can like it'd be like how you begin with like the last chorus of the song, with the higher, that's a very obvious thing. And it brings a lot of attention. But you can also do more fun with it. And I think we did both for this song. And there are moments where you think, well, what are very big change, pay attention to things, or maybe just a little bit subtle. So you feel like they're going to be in the place, but don't necessarily see it. So, so in that example, we changed theme, but we did it in a very subtle way, so you might not even notice, but subconsciously, you feel like, you know, in something place, maybe. And then I think in this example, we made the key change much more obvious. We went to a different key that was much further away from the original key. And that was the C section music, which we're getting before everyone. And I think that was jumping. So yeah, so we're getting much more complications going on. And if you wanted to bring attention to that, so bring it more different places. The story is changing and it's evolving. And so we did that by making the pictures much more pronounced than others. Therefore, another key change when the title comes in, that's another obvious key change. When the title is coming out, it's angry, you know, what's going on, what are these people doing, you know, we want to make that really clear that something new is happening right now. So that last point, I want to start by saying it is subjective in nature. So while I might feel that these, you know, forms and changes, like this kind of mood, you may very well feel and that's the beauty of art, right? That is subjective. So another thing we do is we wanted to find ways to give each sort of character the little moments that characters have. Wanted to characterize that through music. And frankly, we also do music because we can do like foreshadow the characters. And we can communicate a lot of the characters' desires and thoughts that aren't necessarily directly spoken in the text. You can show it through music. Yeah, so like that. So this example. So in that first example,
Oh, no.
I'm thinking over. So initially when we went to possum, it's possum.
Sorry?
They're small possum release.
Yes.
So the possum is initially it's sort of a bit nervous or what am I doing, that possum is on. And so the music reflects that. So the music is a bit more laid back with the
The first one?
If you have a music is a bit more laid back, then when the possum decides to jump, because they do it, they get confident, get more sort of excited. The music reflects that. So it's much more bouncy. It's a little bit more poppy as well, and definitely excited. And another thing we do, it reflects the sort of the mood that they're in the story. So when it's listening, we need to quite tense. If you're okay, you need to be honest. If the goal is this is what I do, and then the music is quite busy at that point. And then when the text sort of evolves, the music evolves as well. So it's all about finding ways to complement and in ways to translate the text to the music. And also like on the last slide, we tried to simulate so the platypus comes along, and try to make certain the platypus and that rarity. We want to tell a story, and that's the main goal. We are musical story. So one challenge is we want to make song, but no one go beautiful. So we're always thinking the character movie, and at the end of the day, it's a children's song, so we don't want to go too crazy with the music. So very important for us to remember we need to hold that. So we went through a few drafts of those force and like Yazzie and things like that. And we decided to range it be more suitable for a number of groups. Like any audience really. And I think another important part of making everything make it simple. Yeah, so reconciling song and product stuff. So before we move on, actually worked really well with music. But the structure of a poem is typical song structure. I'm not always the same. So for a song, for example, typically you have your verse, chorus, form, okay? And I think the chorus in a song is very important. because it's simple, it's what you sort of come in the car or shower, you know, and it's always repeated each time, same. Whereas in a poem and in Frog River, we don't necessarily have that. We don't have any kind of repeated sections and things like that. So you have to find other ways to make it memorable and to add repetition in there. And so that's why I felt that A in the sort of B section for music, we want to repeat that a lot, so it can sort of get it all stuck in the brain. And only have sort of one kind of extra section away from that, which is the C section, that will sort of balance the popularity, make it more relevant. Yeah, so I'm done.
Yes.
So I hope you learn a bit more about putting music to a poem or a text. Pass it back over.
Thank
you.
you.
About the workbooks.
Yes,
Well, thank you very much.
very briefly. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So these are the groups of students who worked with me initially to create the poem, and they then worked in groups and subgroups. It was quite a task doing these, you know, scaffolding all these different groups, doing different things. It was a very, very busy semester for me, I'll tell you that. But we did eventually, within the 13-week semester, from the conceptualization of an idea or the germination of an idea, to the creation of the poem, to the translations of the poem, to then creating the workbooks in using genre theory and teaching learning cycle embedded within all these workbooks. So just like any other credible project, each one of the workbook development also went through the same process. The workbooks are actually, I don't think they are final yet, but I have shared them online because the students have graduated. So it's hard to bring them back to do this work. So maybe another group of students will take on and build more resources later on. Yeah, and talk. So these are initially the Cantonese and the Potongua translations, which I think work really well. Of course, I don't speak either of the dialects, but from the speakers of the dialects, they work. They also have some videos, recordings, and audio recordings, which are of course not the song version, but they do have them. They have the workbooks. These are now on the FLC website, and you can have a look at each one of them. So the Learning English with the Frog River is written for learners who speak Chinese as a mother tongue. So it is translingual between Chinese and English. So the target language being English, but there's a lot of use of Chinese within it. And the other ones are written more for English speakers learning Cantonese or Mandarin. And then, of course, as we said, we do have action and continuity. So we are working on ideas. One of the ideas actually was to bake cakes for Frog River cakes for you guys today, but we just didn't have enough time. We were just finishing the video last night. So we do have to do activity socks, grip socks for both those people who do yoga and Pilates and things like that. So you can see the back end. This is Anne's work. She's the artist, right? So she's, you know, the grip will look like a river, and the front will have different characters from the Frog River. We will perhaps have hand puppets because that will go along well with the teaching material, so that the teaching material turns into role play, and the role play can then be worked with the puppets. So lots happening. So